Hey guys, this is Mo from Mo in the Deep End, and we are getting further along, which is great, always great. We are doing well. We are getting our stuff going together, and we are now on part 4, Odinites in Westville. So sit back, continue cleaning, doing whatever you're doing, and I will try to walk us through this. And if you have any questions, I know there were some questions on other videos of this. I will try to answer those or at least try to dig in and find out. There are a lot of channels that are doing much better than me. They have a lot more time than I do. No 6 kids, no one Frybert, no 5 Catos. So, they have done a lot of incredible work. Defense Diaries, Sleuthy Goosey, a lot of, really good, different places to look. So I will try to link those if I remember. If not, I will try to remember to link them tomorrow. So let's get going. Part 4, Odinites at Westville. After his arrest, Richard Allen was forced to be housed in Westville Correctional Facility based on a safekeeping order. On April 3rd, 2023, two of the transport guards, excuse me, walking Richard Allen to and from his visits, prominently displayed multiple patches on their correct Department of Corrections uniform. 170 at the time, April 3rd, 2023. Defense was fully aware of Odinite involvement in the murders, but law enforcement likely would not have known that defense was aware of Odinite involvement and would explain why they felt comfortable wearing the patches. The top patch in Odin We Trust was displayed under their embroidered name tags on the right of their Department of Correction hereafter DOC uniform shirt. On the left side of their DOC uniform shirts were two patches. The lower two patches consisted of a partial American flag and interlocking triangles. The interlocking triangles is a common symbol for those involved in pagan Odinite religions. 171, an undercover state trooper who is familiar with hate groups, runes, and Odinism, stated that interlocking triangles are associated with Odinist belief system, Department of Undercover State Trooper, or deposition of undercover state trooper, page 37, lines 1 through 20, or 11 through 25, and page 38, lines 1 through 17. Also find attached a photograph of interlocking triangles, which undercover trooper was referring to as marked as Exhibit 2 in deposition. This photograph is marked as Exhibit 116. Above the American flag interlocking triangle patch was a patch that proclaimed, "I hate people." Okay, same, sir, but for different reasons. You're actually the kind of the reason I hate people. Below those images, or below are images of those patches, in spite of the fact that for over 5 months from November 2022 to April 3rd, 2023, Richard Allen's defense team had been able to bring their phones when using Richard Allen after Richard Allen's defense team showed photographs of a decrepit Richard Allen at Westville. Warden Galipio apparently issued an order that Richard Allen's defense team were no longer allowed to bring in their phones. Because Richard Allen's defense team were no longer allowed to bring in their phone, defense team was not able to take photographs or video of these patches after April 3rd, 2023. Therefore, the defense is providing affidavits from members of Richard Allen's defense team that viewed these patches on multiple occasions after April 3rd, 2023. Find attached affidavit of Max Baker, marked as Exhibit 117. Also attached affidavit of Matt Hoffman, attached as Exhibit 112. These are the patches worn by the guards. The images below of the patches worn by Sergeant Robinson and Jones were found on Etsy. These patches can also be purchased on Etsy. Well, there you go. I'd actually probably get that patch, to be very honest with you. That's upsetting. I don't want to have anything to, in common with any of these people, but I would probably get that patch, which is sad. The first time that Richard's defense team noticed Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Robinson and the patches shown above that they wore on the DOC uniform was on April 3rd, 2023. This also coincides with the time frame that Richard Allen's mental health began a steep decline. From that point forward, April 3rd, 2023, these two guards, Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones, seemed inseparable from Richard Allen. 173, Max Baker affidavit. So these are both going to be statements from Max Baker's affidavits. Odinite Corrections Officer s- Robinson and Jones would walk Richard Allen to and from his attorney's visits, as well as one occasion when Richard visited his wife, always wearing these embroidered patches. For a period, Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones were also videotaping Richard Allen and his interactions with his attorneys. This ended only upon complaint by Richard's attorneys after several visits. Additionally, Sergeant Robbins and Sergeant Jones were always close enough to Richard to be assured that Richard did not feel comfortable talking to his attorneys or his wife without knowing that these Odinite guards were within earshot of anything he would tell his lawyers or wife. Max Baker and Matt Hoffman have both been part of Richard Allen's defense team since December 2022 and have met with Richard on several occasions. Paragraph 10 of Max Baker's affidavit, Exhibit 115, provides insight into some of what was going on at Westville with the Odinist guards, Jones and Robinson. During one memorable visit on May 4th, 2023, myself, Attorney Baldwin, and Attorney Rossi met with Richard Allen to discuss matters involving the case. At this time, Richard Allen was mentally and physically in a state of deterioration and was nearly non-communicative. During the visit, Richard Allen repeatedly asked whether or not his wife was okay and his family was okay. He claimed that on a couple of occasions that they were going to kill him, end quote. When asked who he was referring to as they, Richard Allen responded by saying the guys with the Odin patches. Up to this point in the legal process, Richard Allen's defense team had never mentioned Odinites or Odinism to Richard Allen, either directly or indirectly. The first time I'm aware of any mention of Odinite involvement to Richard Allen was during the visit of August 25th, 2023, when Kathy Allen attended. A discussion occurred between attorney and client regarding ties to the crime scene. At an August 10th, 2023 deposition, the defense finally revealed to Jerry Holman, one of the main investigators, quotes, air quotes, scare quotes, on this case, that the defense knew that the evidence exposed a high likelihood that Odinites committed this murder by laying out the evidence right in front of Holman. Up until that time, the defense had strategically played dumb about possessing any knowledge of Odinite involvement. This strategy was in place for many reasons. However, the defense finally revealed its knowledge to Jerry Holman on August the 10th, 2023. 1 week later, during their first attorney visit since that August 10th, 2023 deposition, Sergeant Robertson, as usual, dropped off at Rick at the attorney meeting. Sergeant Jones was absent on this visit. However, something else was noticeably different on this visit. Notably missing from Sergeant Robinson's uniform were the Odinite patches that Richard's defense team had taken note of on every attorney visit since April 3rd, 2023. Perhaps not so coincidentally, after Jerry Holman became aware that the defense team had knowledge of Odinite involvement in the murder, magically those patches were removed from Robinson's uniform, leaving blank spots where the patches used to be displayed on the very next attorney visit. 20 or 175. Max Baker affidavit. The defense would remind the court, and also, perhaps not coincidentally, Tony Leggett was the only person that refused to support the transport of Richard Allen out of Westfield. And when other options, Cass County, were available, Leggett cited his sole reason for rejecting Richard Allen being moved from Westfield, 76 miles away, to Cass County, Logansport, is that he, Leggett, would have difficulty transporting Richard Allen to Delphi from Logansport for hearing and trial less than 20 miles away. 176, and that is from Legette's deposition, page 50, lines 1 through 11. Yes, it would be much harder for him to go 20 miles than 76 miles. Very difficult, very hard. Yet, Leggett refused to agree to the transport, leaving Richard Allen in Westfield guarded by Odinites. When factoring everything contained in this memorandum, Legette's opposition to moving Richard Allen to Cass County over transportation concerns is troubling, especially when the patches were moved after the depots. Very strange. Also, filed contemporaneously with the Franks motion and the memorandum is the defense's emergency request to transport Richard Allen out of Westfield to the Cass County Jail, despite Tony Leggett's objection to the same, as defense has legitimate concerns to Richard's safety. And once this motion and memorandum are filed, beyond Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Robinson wearing the "In Odin We Trust" patches, what else links them to Odinism? Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Robinson's relationship with Odinism went beyond the patches that they each proudly displayed while transporting Richard Allen to and from his attorney visits. Sergeant Robinson, on his Facebook page, Sergeant Robinson does not hide his devotion to Odinism. On June 25th, 2023, Robinson posted a photo of what defense would like to call an altar featuring horns, antlers, and Thor's hammer, and a dish sitting atop some type of animal fur, with various runes decorating the outer edges of the dish. All these items were placed on what appears to be a circular wooden platter. 177. See attached as Exhibit 118. It appears that Sergeant Jones liked Sergeant Robinson's Odin altar post. 178. Find attached Exhibit 119. Sergeant Robinson altar Al Sergeant Robinson's altar to Odin is similar to an altar to Odin post by Brad Holder. 179, find attached as Exhibit 120. As stated by Max Baker in his affidavit, Sergeant Robinson was involved in transporting Richard Allen to most, if not all, of his attorney's visits. Sergeant Robinson always wore his Odin patches. However, that changed following Holman's contentious August 10th, 2023 deposition. In that deposition, which has been attached and provided to the court as an exhibit, about two-thirds of the way through the deposition, Holman begins getting called out by the defense for Unified Command's incompetent handling of the Odin aspect of this investigation. It was also at that point in the deposition that the defense began to ask critical questions concerning the way that Unified Command handled the investigation of Brad Holder, Patrick Westfall, Johnny Messer, and Elvis Fields. 180. Holman's deposition has been provided for the court. Conscientious of the deposition the conscientiousness of the deposition contentiousness, sorry guys, began on page 210 and lasted through the rest of the deposition. You will note that nowhere in the deposition did the defense reveal to Holman that the defense, was aware that Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones were wearing the "In Odin We Trust" patches. Attorneys Rossi and defense team member Max Baker visited Richard Allen on August 17th, 2023, only 7 days after the contentious deposition with Holman, in which it became obvious the defense was fully aware of the strong evidence that Odinists committed the murders. At this August 17, 2017 visitation, as Max Baker states in his affidavit, Sergeant Robinson no longer was wearing his patch. 181, and it's from the affidavit. The defense team has no direct knowledge as to whether Jerry Holman or anyone from Unified Command contacted Sergeant Robinson or anyone else from Westville to alert them that Rich's defense team was fully aware that the evidence supported Odinist being involved in the murders. However, it is certainly a curiosity that deserves attention and consideration. Hmm. Hmm. As Max Baker also described in his affidavit, Sergeant Robinson was always within a few feet of Richard Allen during Richard's meeting with his wife, Kathy. The two visits that Richard had his wife there with his wife were without the hustle and bustle and noise of other inmates during their visitation. While Warden Gallipo may claim that Westville was doing Richard a favor by allowing him privacy with his wife, the defense views it differently. With no other inmates in the room was completely quiet. Sergeant Robinson could hear everything that Richard told his wife. Certainly, Robinson and Jones stood close to enough to Richard to intimidate Richard from talking openly and honestly to his wife about what was going on in Westfield. Additionally, in their combined 50 plus years of practicing criminal defense, attorneys Baldwin and Rossi have never had their purported confidential attorney visits videotaped with a handheld camcorder. Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Robinson began April 31st or 3rd, 2023 began videotaping Richard Allen's interactions with his attorneys. Particularly outrageous was the fact that Richard Allen was required to face the camcorder from about 10 feet away through a glass. This means that Richard's mouth was being videotaped. That means that Richard was not able to talk freely with his attorney and say things like they're stating, if I don't tell my wife I'm guilty, they're going to harm my wife. If Richard were to say anything like that, it would be on video. Remember, Richard Allen continuously asked the defense team if Richard's wife, and family were okay. 182, affidavit of Mass Baker. So these men, there's, and I get this. Look, there is a lot still being made about the fact that allegedly Um, Richard Allen has confessed several times while talking to his wife, but if he confessed under these conditions, then absolutely in no way was that a real confession, in my opinion. Now, again, I'm not a lawyer. I am simply a person that would really, really love for these girls to get justice. And if it turns out that the state, I am in no way the smartest person in the world. If if the state has all of the evidence and everything, and I am wrong, I will eat my words and I will say, "Look, y'all, I was totally wrong. What a doofus I was." And it won't bother me one bit because we have all been majorly wrong, and goodness, being humble about being wrong is part of life. It just is, but I don't feel that in my gut, and until they show me something that goes against, if it were just my gut, I wouldn't be so sure, but it's my gut and my logic that says that one man couldn't have done all this, and, where there's smoke, there's fire, and where there are is the smell of stink, the you're tracking stuff in on the floor, you done walked in dog poo, okay? It just is. I'm sorry. It just Look, everyone wants justice for these girls. These girls had all of their life stolen. These parents, these families had, the future that these girls would have had, the moments, their prom, their, first car, their first boyfriend, their first, sad heartbreak, their first job, their first, you know, moments as adults, their first grandchildren. I mean, they had everything taken away from them, and I'd really like them to get justice for that. But this isn't that. The defense obtained video from the has obtained video from the prison. One of the videos we obtained show the aftermath of something that happened to Richard Allen. Find attached a still shot of Richard Allen taken from a video at Westville that Westville produced. Defense doesn't have the exact date, but the video indicates that the video was taken between May 26th and May 30th. The still shot is attached to this memorandum and filed as Exhibit 121. The defense is not sure exactly what happened to Richard Allen to cause him to look the way they depicted in the still shot, whether it was self-harm or something else. The fact that Richard was being watched by Odinites and the evidence strongly supports Odinite involvement in the murders causes great concern for the defense in terms of Rick's safety. In addition, in Matt Hoffman's affidavit, you will find that the last hearing on June 15th, 2023, Rick was constantly pleading with the guards not to shock him. Please don't shock me. Please don't shock me. Please don't shock me. Matt Hoffman indicated Rick made the comment in front of multiple guards, in front of multiple members of Rick's defense team. Sergeant Jones. Sergeant Jones' Facebook reveals his ties to Odinism. Find attached an image taken from Sergeant Jones' Facebook page marked as Exhibit 122. As you can see, the interlocking triangles appear on Sergeant Jones's patch also appear in this video. You will also know the rune in the note the rune in the lower left-hand corner of the video. It is hard to see because it is black, but also remember that Sergeant Jones liked Sergeant Robinson's altar to Odin. The defense would request the court review Max Baker's affidavit to learn of Sergeant Jones' involvement in the guarding of Richard Allen, as it is nearly identical to Sergeant Robinson's involvement. Conclusion of Part 4. They don't teach you in lawsuit what to do when your client, who is accused of murder, is being guarded by members of a religious cult whose members, evidence strongly supports, were actually murderers. Were the actual murderers. 183. Again, the defense is not claiming that Sergeant Jones or Sergeant Robinson were involved in the murders, just that they are Odinites, members of the same religious cult that evidence strongly supports were involved in the murders of Abby and Libby. Yet, this is where we are. At some point in time, coincidences cease to be coincidences. The fact that Leggett did not want Richard Allen to be moved from Westfield, reportedly over transportation issues, is just curious. The fact that Odinites are guarding Richard is very concerning, or at the very least curious, considering the evidence discussed in this memorandum. The fact that Sergeant Robertson stopped wearing his In Odin We Trust patches within days of Jerry Holman and Unified Command learning that the defense was fully aware of the evidence linking Odinist to the crime scene and United Command had avoided investigating Odinist is just curious. Again, the court must determine whether Leggett acted intentionally or recklessly when he omitted or lied about the information Leggett, drafted in the affidavit for search warrant. Defense could ask the court to consider Leggett objecting to Richard Allen's transfer to Cass County over transportation evidence as evidence of intentionality in that Leggett wanted Allen to remain in Westfield, guarded by Sergeant Robertson and Sergeant Jones and any other Odinite of whom the defense has not learned worked at Westfield, sorry. And then I'm gonna go ahead and roll part 5 into this. Part 5 is Richard Allen has no ties to Odinism or any religious cult and has no ties to the crime scene. Tony Leggett has testified under oath that there is no DNA linking Richard Allen to the crime scene. 184. These are going to be the first 3 are going to be from, the Leggett deposition, the rest are gonna be from Holman. Leggett has further testified that he is unaware of anything that links, Richard Allen to the crime, though his phone through his phone, computers, or electronics. 185. Leggett has further testified that he is unaware of any evidence that links Richard Allen to any weird religious cult groups. 186. Jerry Holman has testified to the following: there is no DNA linking Richard Allen to the crime scene. 187. So these are all going to be from Holman's, um, deposition. There is no data extracted from Richard Allen's phone connecting him to the murders. 188. No data extracted from Libby's phone connected Richard to the murders. 189. There is no evidence that Richard Allen is or was connected to any other suspect in this case. There is no evidence found on social media that connects Richard Allen to the murders. There is no evidence extracted from Richard Allen's computers that connects him to the murders. There are no there is no fingerprint evidence that connects Richard Allen to the murders. This section is very short because simply there is no evidence linking Richard Allen to the murders. However, in his affidavit for search warrant, Leggett attempted to drum up as much connectivity as he could muster between Richard Allen and the murders to convince Judge Diner that it was more likely than not that the evidence of the murders would be found in Richard Allen's house and vehicles. Here is essentially what Leggett swore and affirmed linked Richard Allen to the crime. 1. Richard Allen was on the trails sometime between 1:30 and 3:30. 2. Richard Allen owns a blue coat. 3. Richard Allen owns guns. 4. Richard Allen owns knives. 5. Legett's claim while holding key evidence that a black Ford Focus was p withholding key evidence that a black Ford Focus was parked at the CPS building between 1:30 and 4 p.m. 6. Legett's claim while withholding key evidence that Betsy Blair observed a man on a bridge that Leggett claimed was Richard Allen. 7. Legett's claim while withholding key evidence that Sarah Carbaugh observed a man walking down the road that Leggett claims 1 was Richard Allen, and also 2 the same man that Betsy Blair viewed on the high bridge. That's all. That's it. With all of the evidence linking you Brad Holder, Patrick Westphal, Elvis Fields, Johnny Messer, Rod Abrams to the murder, as discussed in Part 2, Leggett did not seek a single search warrant for any of those high-level suspects. None. However, 26 days before the election, Leggett made a choice to seek a search warrant for Allen's house based upon items 1 through 7 above. Let's run through this list one by one. Number 1, Richard Allen was on the trails between 1:30 and 3:30. The single solitary source for this information is Dan Doolin from the Department of Natural Resources. Therefore, in order to confidently trust that Richard Allen actually said that he was on the trail between 1:30 and 3:30, as stated in Legett's affidavit, Dan Doolin's work product must also have to be trusted. Words matter when talking to someone. For example, if the exchange between Dan Doolin and Richard Allen was this: "Richard, we think the girls were abducted between 1:30 and 3:30. Were you on the trail at any point in time between 1:30 and" Griffin, no. Sorry, I had to yell at someone. Between 1:30 and 3:30, uh, were you on the trail at any point in time between 1:30 and 3:30 on February The 13th. And Richard answered, "Yes, that does not mean that Richard Allen was actually on the trail the entire time between 1:30 and 3:30. However, Dolan could memorialize that exchange as Richard claiming he was on the trail the entire 2-hour time span. So if so, Dullen's report could be inaccurate. Therefore, Dullen's accuracy in writing reports may need to be considered and scrutinized. The defense does not have to go very far in scrutinizing Dullen's accuracy in report writing. It can start with the report Dullen wrote about his interaction with Richard Allen. The conversation between Richard Allen and Dan Dolan came up when Richard Allen called the tip line to provide limited information that he, Richard, may have had his may have had from his time on the day or his time on the trail that day. Dullen and Richard met at a grocery store in Delphi. The conclusion of Dullen's interview with Richard Allen, Dullen prepared his report. However, Dullen screwed up the most basic of tasks, getting the name right. Dullen was so sloppy in drafting the report, he put Richard Allen's name into the system as Rick Allen Whiteman. Well, there you go. 194. When Leggett was asked if Dullen made any mistakes on that report drafted following his interview, Leggett responded, "I don't none that I'm aware of, no." Leggett deposition pages 11, lines 7 through 12, but fellow Unified Command member Jerry Holman had a different answer. There was an error. I don't know if it was a processing or whatever you want to call it, but at some point, it got lost in the shuffled and answered incorrectly. Holman Depot, page 82, lines 7 through 12. Sure, Jan. Before being forced to sell their home and move away from the community they loved because of horrific allegations that Rick brutally murdered two young girls, Rick Allen and his wife Kathy lived for many years on Whiteman Drive. This is probably the source of Dullen's mistake. Find Exhibit 123, Dullen's Unclassified FOFUL report affiliated with shows DNR officer Dan Dullen identifying Richard Allen as Rick Allen Waitman in the system. Well, since we can't necessarily trust DNR Dan's accuracy in writing reports, at least there would be a tape recording that would be available to provide precise words used by Richard Allen, right? Wrong. Find attached Exhibit 124. Oh, for the love of, which is a report provided to the defense in discovery from DNR Dan concerning his interview with Richard Allen. In this report, DNR Dan wrote the following: I checked my audio recordings and I cannot find one for him. I will keep looking because I am very sure I recorded every interaction I had related to my assigned leads. Of course, another source of information of what time Richard Allen was on the trail of that day is Richard Allen himself. As discussed previously in this memoranda, Richard Allen told Leggett that he, Richard Allen, arrived on the trail around noon and left around 1:30. This information that Leggett concealed from Judge Diner, Richard's black Ford Focus was not parked at the CPS building at 2:15, according to Betsy Blair. This was also information that Leggett concealed from Judge Diner. Leggett also failed to inform Judge Diner that DNR Dan cannot be trusted to perform the most basic of tasks when conducting an investigation. Get the name right. Leggett swearing under oath that Richard Allen was on the trails between 1:30 and 3:30 based on Dan Dullen's lost and unrecorded interview may not be the best benchmark for Judge Diner to rely on. Unfortunately, Judge Diner would not know the unreliability of Dillon's reports because Leggett never let him know. Number two, Richard Allen owns a blue coat, as do many other men. Richard Allen owned a gun, as do millions of other men. Richard Allen owns knives, as do millions of other men. 5. His black Ford Focus was parked at the CPS building between 1:30 p.m. and 4 p.m. As the court knows by now, at 2:15 p.m., Betsy Blair observed a vehicle parked at the old CPS lot that resembled a 1965 not black Comet with angular design. This is not Richard Allen's vehicle. More importantly, Tony Leggett concealed this fact from Judge Diner. 6. Betsy Blair observed a man on a bridge that Leggett claimed was Richard Allen. As the court knows by now, the man that Betsy Blair observed on the bridge was a 20-year-old kid with brown poofy hair that did not resemble Rick Allen. This is not surprising considering that Rick Allen left Monon Trail at 1:30 and therefore was not on the high bridge when Betsy Blair observed the 20-year-old kid. Rick Allen's black Ford Focus was not at the CPS lot at 2:15, which is further evidence that Rick Allen was not on the bridge, and he had already left the trails. Again, Leggett concealed that Betsy Blair had identified a young man on the bridge and not Rick Allen. Number 7, Sarah Carbaugh observed a man walking down the road that Leggett claims 1 was Richard Allen and also 2 was the same man that Betsy Blair viewed on the High Bridge. As the court knows by now, Sarah Carbaugh observed a man wearing a tan coat and muddy pants. This man does not meet the description of the man that Betsy Blair observed on the bridge, which, according to Leggett, is the same man that Carbaugh observed on 390 or 300 North. And because Richard Allen's black Ford Focus was not at the CPS lot, Richard Allen could not have been the man walking down 300 North. Leggett lied to Judge Diner when Leggett, claimed that in 2017, Sarah Carbaugh observed a man with blue coat and muddy, bloody clothing. Richard Allen is not connected to these horrific murders in any way. Leggett attempted to convince Judge Diner that the evidence of the murders could be found in Rick's home over 5 years after the girls were slain, based on 7 enumerated reasons identified above. If Leggett had been honest, then Judge Diner would not have signed the warrant. Leggett wasn't honest, though, and Richard Allen's lack of any connection whatsoever to the crime scene, combined with Leggett's lies and concealments, merit a Frank's hearing. Conclusion of the memoranda. To prevail on its request for the court to set this matter for a Frank's hearing, the defense must make a substantial preliminary showing that omitted or false statements made knowingly or intentionally with reckless disregard. If the trial court concedes that omitted or false statements were necessary for the finding of probable cause, the trial should set a hearing on the defendant's request. Franks versus Delaware 438 US 154, 98 S Court 264 or 74, a bunch of court stuff. Look. Indiana's Girth Court actually provided a simple way to assess whether a Frank's hearing is justified. Is the concealed and false information contained in the brief the type of information that a reasonable person would have known, quote, was the kind of thing the judge would have wished to know? Girth versus State, bunch of case stuff. The defense provided a very long and detailed analysis of the fact because the court must determine whether evidence exists that Leggett acted intentionally or that Leggett acted with reckless disregard. The defense believes that the very long, detailed analysis of the facts was necessary to provide a very strong foundation from which this court could conclude that Leggett acted intentionally or with reckless disregard. Or more simply put, the very detailed analysis of the fact allows the court to conclude that, quote, yes, the omitted information and false information identified in the memorandum is the type of information that Judge Diner would have wanted to know before signing the warrant, girth at 375. Wherefore, Richard Allen, by and through his attorneys Andrew J. Baldwin and Bradley Rossi, requests that this court set this case for a Franks hearing, at which time the defense will be asking for the search warrant to be deemed illegal and the fruits of the illegal warrant to be suppressed. So there you have it. That is the whole entire memoranda. There you have it. Um, Honestly, that was really awesome. Like I said, with a claim like this, you are going to need absolute extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So I'm glad that they have that. I'm glad that they were using, uh, all of the information that they got from Discovery. I hope that they are finding more in Discovery that, um, is helpful with this because something is really hinky and it's going on and it's really gross and I don't know what it is. So hopefully we can get to the bottom of this. Hopefully, after Judge Cole gets smacked down in the, no contempt hearing, she will perhaps give us a, Frank's hearing, or maybe she'll get removed with a habeas. Another writ of mandamus, because this is getting ridiculous. I don't know how they intend to convict this man on no DNA, no electronic link, no, just a guy who didn't even write his report correctly, and a spent shell casing, or an unspent shell casing that allegedly cycled through a weapon from Richard Allen's home. Okay. Sure. Anywho, I am going to be done for right now. I'm going to maybe lay down and have a hot drink because that was a lot of talking. And I thought I usually did a lot of talking, but I guess that's more than I normally do. So I am going to have some hot tea and honey and uh, just, not talk for a minute. My kids will be so happy. Have a wonderful weekend. I will talk to you guys in a little bit. Have a just great weekend. See you soon. Bye, guys.